Welcome, dear listener, to a calm exploration of one of animation's most fascinating antagonists. Over the next 2 hours, we'll unravel the complete story of Bill Cipher, the dream demon who haunted Gravity Falls, Oregon, and the minds of viewers everywhere. This is designed to be a gentle, thorough journey. There's no rush here. We'll take our time exploring every aspect of Bill's existence, from his mysterious origins to his chaotic reign and ultimate downfall. So, settle in, get comfortable, adjust your pillows, and let's begin at the very beginning, in a dimension far different from our own. Bill Cipher. The name itself evokes a sense of mystery. A cipher is a code, a puzzle to be solved. And Bill was certainly that, a riddle wrapped in an enigma, contained within a geometric shape. His appearance was deceptively simple. A yellow triangle with a single eye, stick-thin arms and legs, a top hat perched jauntily on his apex. He looked like something a child might draw, harmless, almost cute. But beneath that simple exterior lurked one of the most dangerous entities in any dimension, a being of near limitless power in the realm of minds and dreams, a creature billions of years old who had witnessed the death of his own reality and sought to reshape all others in his chaotic image. To understand Bill Cipher, we must understand where he came from. We must travel back, far back, to a time before time had meaning, to a place where space existed in only 2 dimensions. We must understand what Bill was before he became what he is, or perhaps what he was. The story of Bill Cipher is ultimately a tragedy. It's the story of a being who could see beyond the limitations of his world, who tried to share that vision, and who ended up destroying everything in the process. It's a story about ambition unchecked by empathy, about power without wisdom, about the dangers of believing that you alone know what's best for everyone. But it's also a story about humanity, about the people who encountered Bill, about the choices they made, the deals they struck, and the courage they found when facing the impossible. So let us begin our journey. Close your eyes if you wish. Let your breathing slow, and travel with me to a realm of pure flatness where everything existed on a single, endless plane. The Euclidean realm, Bill Cipher, wasn't always the chaotic triangle we know. Long ago, in a flat dimension known only as the second dimension, Bill existed as a simple geometric shape among other 2-dimensional beings. To truly understand this place, we must imagine something almost impossible for 3-dimensional beings like ourselves to conceive. Picture a world where everything exists on a single plane, no up, no down, just forward, backward, and side to side. A world that is essentially an infinite sheet of paper, and everything that exists is drawn upon that paper, unable to rise above it or sink below it. In this realm, the inhabitants were all geometric shapes. Circles, squares, triangles, hexagons, every regular polygon you can imagine, living their lives on this flat plane. They had homes, though these homes were simply arrangements of line segments. They had families, societies, hierarchies, and rules. The society of the second dimension was strictly organized. Circles were the highest class. Priests and leaders, their smooth curves considered the most perfect form. The more sides a polygon had, the higher their status. So, hexagons outranked pentagons, pentagons outranked squares, and squares outranked triangles. Triangles, like Bill, were near the bottom of the social hierarchy. Isosceles triangles were considered working class. Equilateral triangles, like Bill appeared to be, were slightly better regarded for their symmetry. But triangles were still triangles. Sharp, angular, considered crude compared to the smooth nobility of circles. In this realm, everyone saw the world as a straight line. Think about it. If you existed on a flat plane and could only look along that plane, you would only see the edge of things. You would see the side of your neighbor as a line segment. You could only perceive the edges of objects, never their full shape from above. To recognize others, the inhabitants of the second dimension used various methods. They would feel along edges, counting sides. They would observe how an entity appeared to change as they moved around them. They would use voice recognition and learned behavior, but they could never see each other the way we see them, as complete shapes from above. It was a limited existence, bound by the very nature of their dimensional reality. But to them, it was reality. It was all they knew. It was all they believed existed. But Bill was different, the gift and the curse. From his earliest existence, Bill could see beyond the flat plane. He could perceive a third dimension that his fellow shapes couldn't comprehend. He could see upward, or what would be upward if such a direction existed in his world. Imagine being the only person in your world who could see a color no one else could perceive. Imagine trying to describe it, only to be met with blank stares and confusion. That was Bill's existence, magnified 1,000 times over. Bill could see the full shapes of his fellow beings from above. He could see them, not as line segments, but as complete polygons. He saw his world not as an endless line, but as an endless plane. And beyond that, he could sense something more, a direction perpendicular to both the directions his people could move in. A third dimension, vast and incomprehensible. At first, perhaps Bill thought this was normal. Perhaps he assumed everyone could see what he could see, but he quickly learned otherwise. When he described what he saw, others thought he was speaking in riddles or making up nonsense. "What do you mean you can see all my sides at once?" they would ask. "That's impossible. I'm standing right in front of you. You can only see my front edge." "What do you mean there's a direction we can't move in? There are only 2 directions along our plane. Talking about a third is like talking about a direction that goes nowhere." Bill's vision isolated him. His gift was incomprehensible to others, and incomprehensibility breeds fear. The other shapes began to avoid him. They whispered that he was mad, that his mind had broken somehow, that he saw things that weren't there. But Bill knew what he saw was real. He knew there was more to reality than the flat plane his people inhabited. And in his isolation, a thought began to form. A terrible, tragic thought that would ultimately doom his entire dimension. If he could show them, if he could somehow make them see what he saw, they would understand. They would thank him. They would realize that their flat existence was a prison, and he held the key to their liberation. The obsession Bill became obsessed with opening his people's eyes. He studied the strange sensations he felt from the third dimension. He developed theories about how their flat world related to this higher dimension. He began to understand that their entire reality might be like a sheet of paper in a 3-dimensional space, infinitely thin in one direction, but extending forever in the other 2. He tried various methods to help others see. He would describe geometric concepts that relied on the third dimension. He would talk about cubes, 6 squares, arranged in a 3-dimensional shape. But how could a square understand a cube when they couldn't even see all sides of a square at once. He would try to demonstrate by moving in ways that seemed impossible to the others. From their perspective, he would seem to disappear and reappear because he was moving slightly up out of their plane in ways they couldn't follow. But none of it worked. No one could see what he saw. No one could understand what he described. And the more he tried, the more frightened his fellow shapes became. The authorities of the second dimension, the circles and high polygons who ruled their society, began to see Bill as a threat. His talk of other dimensions, of impossible movements, of seeing things that couldn't be seen. It threatened the order of their world. It contradicted the fundamental truths their society was built upon. They warned him to stop. They told him to keep his delusions to himself. Some suggested he be confined for his own safety and the safety of others. Bill felt betrayed. He was trying to help them, to free them from their limited perception, and they responded with fear and threats. His frustration grew into anger. His anger grew into something darker. If they wouldn't see willingly, perhaps they needed to be forced to see. The terrible revelation. What Bill discovered next is unclear. The details are lost to time, or perhaps deliberately obscured by Bill himself. But somehow, Bill found or created a way to make his people see the third dimension. Perhaps it was a tear in their dimensional fabric. Perhaps it was a method of pulling their plane of existence into a higher dimensional space. Perhaps it was something else entirely, something we three-dimensional beings couldn't understand any better than the second-dimensional beings could understand Bill's vision. But whatever it was, it worked. For a brief, terrible moment, the inhabitants of the second dimension could see what Bill saw. They could perceive the third dimension. They could see themselves and each other as complete shapes rather than line segments, and it destroyed them. Their minds evolved to process only 2 dimensions of sensory information, couldn't handle the influx of data from a third dimension. Imagine if suddenly you could see not just in 3 dimensions, but in 4. If you could see every moment of an object's timeline simultaneously, past and future and present all at once. Your mind would break trying to process it. That's what happened to the second dimension. The shapes couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. Their consciousness shattered. Some simply went mad. Others ceased to function entirely. Their vital processes halted by the sensory overload. And then the dimension itself began to burn. The fire. The burning of the second dimension is one of the great mysteries of Bill's history. What does it mean for a dimension to burn? How does a mathematical plane of existence catch fire? Perhaps it was metaphorical, a way of describing the collapse of their reality. Or perhaps it was literal in ways we can't understand. Perhaps opening a 2-dimensional space to the third dimension creates some kind of dimensional friction, a tearing of the fabric of space-time that manifests as heat and flame. Bill would later describe it as liberating his dimension. He would say he freed them. But the images he sometimes projected suggested something more horrific, an entire plane of existence consumed in flames of impossible colors, shapes screaming in geometric agony, reality itself unraveling. Whether Bill intended this outcome is a question that may never be answered. Did he know what would happen when he forced his people to see? Was this a terrible accident, a tragic consequence of good intentions? Or did some part of Bill, angry and rejected, want to punish those who couldn't appreciate his gift. Bill himself might not know the truth. Memory is unreliable, especially over billions of years. Trauma distorts recollection. And Bill is, above all else, a liar. To others, and perhaps to himself. What we know for certain is this: the second dimension was destroyed. Every being Bill had ever known perished. His family, if he had one. His friends, if he had any. Every soul in his entire reality, gone in an instant. And Bill survived. The aftermath. How did Bill survive when everyone else perished? This, too, is unclear. Perhaps his ability to perceive the third dimension gave him a way to escape his dimension's destruction. Perhaps he simply drifted up out of his plane of existence as it burned, finding himself floating in the space between dimensions. Or perhaps something darker happened. Perhaps Bill wasn't just a passive survivor, but an active participant in his dimension's end. Perhaps he didn't escape the fire. Perhaps he started it and walked through it unharmed, transformed by the experience from a simple triangle into something far more powerful and terrible. In the immediate aftermath, wherever Bill found himself, he was alone. Truly alone in a way few beings ever experience. Not just lonely, absent of company in a universe that still contained other beings, but alone in the sense that everyone who had ever existed in his frame of reference was gone. The guilt must have been crushing, or perhaps Bill felt no guilt at all. Perhaps the trauma broke something in him, severed his ability to feel empathy or remorse. Perhaps he convinced himself that he had indeed liberated his people, that their deaths were a mercy, freeing them from their limited existence. Or perhaps he simply went mad. Over time, Bill drifted through the spaces between dimensions. He found himself in a realm outside normal reality, a place of chaos and impossibility, a place where beings like him, who didn't fit anywhere else, could exist, the nightmare realm, finding a new home. After the destruction of his dimension, Bill found himself in a place outside normal reality, the nightmare realm. This was a space between dimensions, a holding area for things that didn't quite belong anywhere else. It was chaotic, lawless, and perfect for a being who no longer fit in any orderly reality. The nightmare realm defied description in conventional terms. It wasn't a place in the traditional sense. It had no fixed geography, no consistent laws of physics. Time flowed strangely there, sometimes forward, sometimes backward, sometimes in loops or spirals. Space folded in on itself in impossible ways. It was a realm of pure chaos, where thoughts could become reality, and reality could dissolve into thoughts. Colors that didn't exist in any normal spectrum shone in the ever-shifting sky. Structures that appeared solid would phase in and out of existence. The very air, if it could be called air, seemed to whisper with the echoes of broken dimensions and shattered realities. For most beings, the nightmare realm would be a hellscape, a place of madness and dissolution. But for Bill, damaged and transformed by the destruction of his own dimension, it felt like home. The inhabitants. In the nightmare realm, Bill wasn't alone. Other entities dwelled there, creatures of chaos and madness who, like Bill, existed outside the normal rules of space and time. These beings had their own stories, their own tragedies and triumphs that had led them to this place between places. There was 8-Ball, an entity whose head was literally an 8-ball, speaking in cryptic predictions and probabilities. There was Teeth, a massive floating pair of jaws with an appetite for reality itself. There was Kryptos, a geometric being not unlike Bill, but different in fundamental ways. There were eye-bats with wings, creatures made of pure screaming, beings that existed in more or fewer than 3 dimensions. Together, they would come to be known as the henchmaniacs, Bill's friends, his crew, his partners in chaos. They were outcasts and refugees from countless realities, brought together by their shared inability to exist in ordered space. Among these beings, Bill wasn't strange. His abilities to see beyond dimensions, to manipulate perception, to enter minds, these weren't abnormalities in the nightmare realm. They were advantages. Here, Bill could be himself fully, without fear of rejection or misunderstanding. The henchmaniacs accepted Bill, and Bill accepted them. They became his family in a way. Dysfunctional, chaotic, but real. They shared stories of the dimensions they'd lost or fled from. They plotted grand schemes that would never come to fruition. They existed in a state of eternal revelry and entropy. For a time, this might have been enough. Bill could have spent eternity in the nightmare realm, playing with his friends, causing minor chaos across the dimensional boundaries, existing in the moment without purpose or direction. But Bill wanted more. Bill always wanted more. Becoming a dream demon. Over time, and time is a difficult concept in the nightmare realm, where years might pass in moments, or moments might last for centuries. Bill honed his abilities. He learned that while he couldn't easily affect the physical world directly from the nightmare realm, he could enter the mindscape. The mindscape was the realm of thoughts, dreams, and memories. Every sentient being with the capacity to think had a mindscape, a mental landscape where their consciousness resided, and the borders between the mindscape and the nightmare realm were thin, permeable, easy to cross. In dreams, Bill had power. Dreams operated on different rules than waking reality. In the dreamscape, the impossible became possible. Physics was negotiable. Logic was optional. And a being like Bill, who understood the malleability of reality better than most, could become nearly godlike. Bill learned to enter dreams without invitation, though it was easier and more effective if the dreamer was somehow receptive to him. He learned to manipulate dream imagery, to create scenarios, to extract information from a dreaming mind. He learned to make himself appear however he wished, as a trusted friend, a mysterious stranger, a helpful guide. Most importantly, Bill learned to make deals. Deals were the key to everything in the mindscape. The human mind, and minds of other species too, operated on certain principles. Consent mattered. Permission mattered. If you could get someone to agree to something, even in a dream, it created a binding contract in the mindscape, one that could have real consequences. Bill developed his technique over countless encounters across countless dimensions. He would appear to dreamers, offering solutions to their problems. Wealth, power, knowledge, love, whatever they desired, Bill claimed he could provide. And all he asked in return were small favors, little agreements, minor deals. Let me into your mind. Tell me your secrets. Give me control of your body for just a moment. Open this door. Build this machine. The deals seemed innocent at first. The price seemed small compared to what was offered. But Bill's deals always came with a price far greater than advertised. The pattern of deception. Bill's method was refined through repetition. He would study his targets carefully, finding their desires, their fears, their vulnerabilities. Then he would craft his approach specifically for them. To the ambitious, he offered power and success. To the lonely, he offered companionship and understanding. To the curious, he offered forbidden knowledge. To the desperate, he offered solutions to impossible problems. He was charming, funny, irreverent. He presented himself as an ally, a friend, someone on your side in a world that didn't understand you. He validated your feelings, agreed with your grievances, encouraged your dreams. And then, once you trusted him, once you made that first deal, he would twist it. The power he gave came with corruption. The success led to ruin. The knowledge drove you mad. The solution to your problem created 10 new ones. Bill's help invariably led to chaos, to destruction, to outcomes that served his own mysterious purposes rather than the goals of those he supposedly helped. Yet because he operated through deals, through agreements freely made, his victims had no recourse. They had agreed. They had consented. They had made the deal with their eyes open, even if they didn't fully understand what they were agreeing to. Bill became known across multiple dimensions as a trickster, a deceiver, a demon who should never be trusted. Stories spread about him, cautionary tales told by those who had survived encounters with him, or about those who hadn't. Never make a deal with a triangle. If you see a yellow eye in your dreams, wake up immediately. Don't trust entities that offer you exactly what you want. Yet still, people made deals with him, because Bill offered something irresistible. He offered shortcuts. He offered solutions that seemed impossible through any other means. And people, when desperate or ambitious enough, convince themselves that they'll be different, that they'll be the exception, that they can outsmart the demon. They were always wrong. The nature of Bill's power. To understand Bill's threat, we must understand the nature of his power. In the mindscape, in dreams, Bill could do nearly anything. He could read thoughts like books. He could manipulate memories, creating false ones, or erasing real ones. He could trap consciousnesses in mental prisons, creating entire worlds of illusion that felt completely real to the trapped mind. He could possess bodies if given permission, controlling them like puppets. He could share visions, forcing people to see what he wanted them to see. He could communicate across vast distances through dreams, coordinating actions across multiple dimensions simultaneously. But all of this power came with limitations. The most significant limitation was the barrier between the mindscape and physical reality. Bill could affect minds, but affecting matter was much harder. He could make you think you were on fire, but he couldn't actually set you on fire, not without using your own body to do it, and that required your permission through a deal. He could show you visions of the future, but he couldn't directly change that future himself. He needed to manipulate others into changing it for him. He could know where treasure was buried, but he couldn't dig it up. He needed someone with a physical body to do that. This was Bill's frustration. He had vast power in the realm of thought, but thought alone couldn't reshape reality the way he wanted. For his grand vision to be realized, he needed access to the physical world. He needed a way to cross the barrier between the nightmare realm and physical reality. He needed a portal, the multiverse. During his time in the nightmare realm, Bill didn't limit himself to a single dimension. He explored the multiverse, reaching out through dreams to countless realities. He saw infinite variations of infinite worlds, each with its own rules and possibilities. He saw dimensions where magic was real and science was myth. He saw dimensions where time ran backwards. He saw dimensions with 50 spatial dimensions instead of 3. He saw dimensions made entirely of thought and dimensions where consciousness didn't exist at all. In his travels through the multiverse, Bill gained knowledge that few beings possessed. He understood the fundamental structures of reality, the laws that govern dimensional boundaries, the weak points where one reality touched another, and he learned about our dimension, the third dimension, with its 3 spatial dimensions and 1 temporal dimension, a reality where matter was solid and persistent, where cause followed effect in reliable patterns, where the laws of physics were consistent and predictable. To Bill, this dimension was perfect for his purposes. It was stable enough to support the kind of reality warping he wanted to achieve, but not so rigid that it couldn't be changed. It had conscious beings he could manipulate. It had physical matter he could reshape once he gained access. And it had weak points, places where the barrier between physical reality and the nightmare realm was thin. Natural anomalies where weirdness leaked through. One such place particularly caught Bill's attention. A small town in Oregon, surrounded by forests and mountains, built on top of a massive deposit of crystallized weirdness that made reality itself unstable. Gravity Falls. The first contacts. Bill had been reaching out to Gravity Falls for a long time, long before the events that would ultimately bring him there. He appeared in dreams to various residents over the years, making small deals, planting seeds, testing the barriers. He found that in Gravity Falls, his power was slightly stronger. The thin barrier meant he could affect physical reality a bit more easily there. Objects would sometimes move in impossible ways. Electronics would malfunction in his presence. The very air seemed to respond to his will. But it wasn't enough. He still couldn't fully manifest. He still needed someone on the inside, someone in the physical world, to build what he needed. He needed someone brilliant enough to understand dimensional mechanics, someone isolated enough to be vulnerable to his manipulation, someone ambitious enough to take risks, someone desperate enough to make a deal with a demon. He needed Stanford Pines. The long game Bill's plan for Gravity Falls didn't happen overnight. It took years of preparation, of studying the town's unique properties, of understanding the people who lived there. Bill was patient when he needed to be. He'd existed for billions of years. What were a few more decades? He watched Gravity Falls change over time. He saw the town grow from a small logging community to a tourist destination. He saw families come and go. He saw the weird things that lived in the forest. Gnomes and manitors and creatures that shouldn't exist, thriving in the town's reality distortion field. And he waited for the right person to arrive. Someone who would be both brilliant enough to build what he needed and vulnerable enough to trust him. In the late 1970s, that person arrived. A young man with 6 fingers, a brilliant mind, and a desperate need to prove himself. Ford Pines had come to Gravity Falls to study its anomalies. He had no idea that he was walking into a trap billions of years in the making. He had no idea that the biggest anomaly in Gravity Falls was watching him, waiting for the perfect moment to introduce himself. Bill's patience was about to pay off. Stanford Pines arrives. In the late 1970s, a young man named Stanford Philbrick Pines arrived in Gravity Falls, Oregon, with a grant, a dream, and a lifetime of feeling different. Ford, as he preferred to be called, had 6 fingers on each hand, a genetic anomaly that had marked him as different from birth. Throughout his childhood and adolescence, this difference had defined him. Some saw it as a deformity. Others saw it as fascinating. Ford himself saw it as a symbol of everything that set him apart from normal people. But different wasn't always bad. Ford's 6 fingers gave him enhanced dexterity. More importantly, his different perspective helped him see patterns others missed. He excelled at mathematics, physics, and theoretical science. He devoured knowledge like others breathed air. Ford had a twin brother, Stanley, though they were far from identical. Where Ford was studious and awkward, Stanley was charismatic and street smart. Where Ford followed rules, Stanley broke them. They balanced each other, or they had, until a terrible accident during their senior year of high school destroyed both their futures. Stanley had accidentally broken Ford's science fair project, the one that would have earned Ford admission to his dream school, West Coast Tech. In his anger and pain, Ford had turned his back on his brother. They hadn't spoken in over a decade. Now Ford was in Gravity Falls, trying to rebuild his life and career. He'd received a research grant to study the town's reported anomalies. UFO sightings, strange creatures, unexplained phenomena. The reports about Gravity Falls read like science fiction, but Ford believed there was real science to be discovered in this weird little town. He purchased a plot of land in the woods and built a cabin, a place to live and work, isolated from distraction, dedicated entirely to his research. Ford threw himself into his work with single-minded intensity. He explored the forests, documented strange creatures, collected samples of unusual phenomena. He filled notebooks with observations, theories, calculations. He was building something important. He was sure of it. A comprehensive study of Gravity Falls that would change how science understood reality itself. But the work was lonely. Ford had always struggled with social connections, and his isolation in the woods made it worse. He had no colleagues to discuss findings with, no peers to challenge his theories. Just Ford, his equipment, and the mysteries of Gravity Falls. He was brilliant, driven, and completely alone. He was perfect. The dream bill first appeared to Ford in a dream, about 6 months after Ford had arrived in Gravity Falls. Ford had fallen asleep at his desk, exhausted from another 18-hour research session. In his dream, he found himself in a strange space, a mindscape, though Ford didn't know to call it that. It looked like his cabin, but wrong, with impossible geometry and colors that didn't exist. And there, floating in the center of the room, was a yellow triangle with a single eye, wearing a small black top hat and bow tie. "Hiya, smart guy." Bill's voice was cheerful, friendly, with a slight echo that suggested vast spaces. "Name's Bill Cipher. I've been watching your work, and I gotta say, I'm impressed." Ford, even in the dream, was analytical. "What are you? Some kind of hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation?" Bill laughed, a high-pitched sound like tinkling glass. "Oh, I'm much more interesting than that. I'm a muse, Sixer, a being from another dimension, here to help brilliant minds like yours achieve their full potential." "Sixer?" Ford found himself oddly pleased by the nickname. No one had ever turned his 6 fingers into something that sounded cool. "That's right. See, I've been around for a long, long time, billions of years, and I've seen a lot of brilliant people waste their potential because they were limited by their dimension's narrow thinking. But you're different. You can see things others can't. Literally, those 6 fingers of yours are a sign of genetic superiority. Bill knew exactly what to say. He'd studied Ford carefully. He knew about the bullying, the isolation, the feeling of being different and misunderstood. And he turned all of it into validation. "I can help you, Ford," Bill continued, floating closer. "I can show you things about gravity falls that you'd never discover on your own. Together, we can unlock secrets of the universe that no human has ever understood. We can change the world. What do you say? Want to make a deal?" Ford should have been suspicious. Later, he would curse himself for not being suspicious. But in that moment, after months of loneliness, talking to an entity that seemed to truly understand him, that called his differences superior rather than weird. "What kind of deal?" Ford asked. "Nothing sinister. I just want to help you with your research. I'll provide information, insights, things I've learned from my billions of years of existence. And you, well, you'll document everything, study it, understand it, in ways I can't because you have that beautiful scientific mind. We'll be collaborators, partners. What do you say?" Ford extended his 6-fingered hand into the dreamscape. "Deal." Bill shook it, his single eye gleaming with triumph. "Pleasure doing business with you, Sixer. This is going to be big, real big. Trust me." The Golden Age. For the next several years, Ford's collaboration with Bill was incredibly productive. Bill would appear in Ford's dreams nearly every night, providing information about Gravity Falls anomalies. He'd tell Ford where to find specific creatures, what they were, how they functioned. He'd provide historical context about the town's weirdness. He'd suggest experiments and observations. Ford's research advanced at an incredible pace. He discovered gnomes, small humanoid creatures that could stack together to form larger humanoid shapes. He documented the hide behind, a creature that was always behind you, making it nearly impossible to observe directly. He found cursed doors that opened to other dimensions, ancient underground laboratories, time-traveling devices. He began compiling his findings into a series of journals, detailed accounts of everything he was learning. These journals would become his masterwork, a comprehensive encyclopedia of the supernatural and anomalous. Bill was the perfect collaborator. He was knowledgeable, enthusiastic, funny. He'd make jokes during their dream sessions, keeping Ford entertained. He'd praise Ford's insights, making him feel valued and appreciated. He never criticized, only encouraged. For Ford, who had spent most of his life feeling like an outsider, Bill's companionship was intoxicating. Finally, someone who understood him, someone who saw his potential, someone who didn't judge him for being different. Ford even started to think of Bill as a friend, maybe his only real friend. But Bill was slowly, carefully, working toward his true goal. The portal proposal. About 2 years into their collaboration, Bill introduced a new idea. "You know, Sixer, there's a limit to how much I can help you from the mindscape. But what if we could meet face to face? What if I could come to your dimension fully?" "Is that possible?" Ford asked, his scientific curiosity piqued. "With the right equipment, absolutely. We'd need to build what's called an interdimensional portal. It's complex. You'd need to understand cross-dimensional mathematics, quantum mechanics, theoretical physics, at levels most humans never reach. But you're brilliant enough to pull it off." "A portal to where?" Ford asked. "Where exactly are you, Bill?" "Oh, a place between places," Think of it as a nexus point where all dimensions touch. From there, I've got access to knowledge about every reality that exists. Imagine what you could learn if you could go there yourself. Imagine the discoveries you could make. Bill painted a picture of infinite knowledge, of understanding the fundamental nature of reality itself. He described it as the ultimate achievement for a scientist, to literally transcend the limitations of their own dimension. Ford was hesitant at first. Building an interdimensional portal was dangerous. The energy requirements alone would be massive. The theoretical mathematics were barely understood. One miscalculation could tear reality apart. But Bill was persuasive. He provided equations, designs, specifications. He showed Ford calculations that proved it could be done safely. He framed it as the natural next step in their collaboration, from studying gravity falls to studying the entire multiverse. Think of it, Ford. You could be the human who opens Earth to the greater multiverse. Your name would be remembered forever. You'd finally get the recognition you deserve, the appreciation that your family and peers never gave you. That last part was key. Bill knew Ford's wound, the feeling that he'd never been properly appreciated, that his brilliance had been wasted or dismissed. The portal became not just a scientific achievement, but validation, proof that Ford was as special as he'd always believed. Ford agreed to build the portal. Years of construction, building. The portal consumed Ford's life for the next several years. The machinery was incredibly complex, requiring custom-built components, exotic materials, and calculations so advanced that Ford had to develop new mathematical frameworks just to describe them. The portal would require enormous amounts of energy to operate. Ford had to tap into Gravity Falls' natural weirdness, the crystallized anomaly energy buried deep beneath the town, to power it. The construction took over his entire basement, a massive machine of impossible design, growing larger and more complex each month. Ford worked obsessively. 18-hour days became 20-hour days. He barely ate, barely slept, except when exhaustion forced him into unconsciousness. And in those brief sleeps, Bill was always there, encouraging him, praising him, providing the next set of calculations he needed. Ford's physical and mental health deteriorated. His hands shook from exhaustion. His eyes developed dark circles. His journal entries became increasingly erratic, filled with complex diagrams and mathematical proofs, but also with signs of paranoia and stress. But he kept working, because Bill had convinced him this was the most important thing he would ever do. This was his legacy. This was his purpose. Ford had hired an assistant at one point, a friendly young man named Fiddleford McGucket, an old college friend who was brilliant with mechanical engineering. Fiddleford helped with the construction, providing valuable insights and solutions to engineering problems. But Fiddleford became increasingly disturbed by what they were building. He'd had brief glimpses through the portal during test runs, and what he saw on the other side terrified him. He begged Ford to stop, to destroy the portal before it was completed. Ford refused. Ford had come too far to stop now. Eventually, Fiddleford left, unable to bear the stress of the project. He would later use a memory erasing device to forget what he'd seen, starting a chain of events that would eventually leave him mentally damaged. Ford was alone again, just him and Bill, building a portal that would doom the world. The terrible truth. The portal was nearly complete when Ford began to notice inconsistencies in Bill's information. Small things at first. equations that didn't quite balance the way Bill said they would, references to phenomena that Ford couldn't verify, vague answers when Ford asked for clarification. Ford started doing independent research, looking into the portal's true destination. He studied dimensional theory from sources Bill hadn't provided. He performed calculations to determine where exactly the portal would open. And slowly, piece by piece, Ford realized the horrifying truth. The portal didn't lead to a place of knowledge and enlightenment. It led to the nightmare realm, a dimension of pure chaos, inhabited by entities of madness and destruction. And once opened, it would allow those entities to flood into Ford's dimension, to reshape reality according to their twisted desires. Bill wasn't a muse. He was a demon, and Ford had been building him a doorway. Ford confronted Bill in the mindscape. "What is the nightmare realm really, Bill?" Bill's demeanor changed instantly. The friendly facade dropped. "Oh, Sixer, you weren't supposed to figure that out yet. I was hoping you'd activate the portal before you got too curious. You lied to me about everything. I prefer to think of it as selective truth-telling." Bill's single eye gleamed with malice. "Besides, what does it matter? The portal's almost done. You're going to finish it. Because if you don't, I'll make your life a living hell. I can enter your mind anytime, Ford. I can torment you every second of every day. You'll never sleep peacefully again." Ford realized the depth of his mistake. He'd let Bill into his mind, made deals with him, given him access to his thoughts and dreams. He was vulnerable in ways he'd never considered. But Ford was stubborn. "I'll destroy the portal." "Go ahead and try, Sixer. But here's the thing. That portal is connected to fundamental forces now. The energy it's drawing from beneath Gravity Falls is already flowing. You shut it down wrong, you could tear a hole in reality anyway. You might destroy the world trying to save it. How's that for a paradox?" Bill was right. Ford's own brilliance had trapped him. The portal was too complex to simply destroy. It needed to be properly deactivated, which required understanding its full operation. But Ford no longer trusted his understanding. How much of what he knew had come from Bill's lies? Ford made a desperate decision. He would hide the journals, the 3 volumes he'd written containing all his research, including the portal's complete specifications. Without all 3 journals, no one could activate the portal safely. The knowledge would be scattered, incomplete, useless. And then he would call the one person he'd sworn never to speak to again, the brother he'd abandoned over a decade ago. He would call Stanley. The brothers return. Stanley Pines arrived in Gravity Falls in the early hours of a winter morning, having driven through the night from New Mexico, where he'd been running a failed business selling cheap products from his car. Stan hadn't heard from Ford in over 10 years. Their last communication had been a bitter argument. After their father had kicked Stan out of the house, Stan had tried to apologize for the science fair incident over the years, but Ford had never responded to his letters. Now, out of nowhere, Ford had sent a postcard with a desperate message. "Please come. F." No explanation, no details, just a plea. Stan found Ford's cabin in the woods, approached the door, and knocked. When Ford opened it, Stan barely recognized him. His brother looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, his eyes wild and paranoid, his posture defensive. "Stanford, what's going on? Are you okay?" Ford grabbed Stan by the shirt and pulled him inside, slamming the door. "Did anyone follow you? Did anyone see you come here?" "What? No, I don't. Ford, what's wrong?" Ford handed Stan a journal. Journal 1. "Take this. Hide it somewhere far away from here. Somewhere no one will ever find it. Don't let anyone see it. Don't read it yourself. Just hide it and forget you ever saw it." "Ford, you're scaring me. What is this? What's going on?" "I've made a terrible mistake, Stanley. I trusted someone I shouldn't have. I built something dangerous. The journals contain information about it. Information that could end the world if it fell into the wrong hands. Or the wrong mind." Stan looked at his brother. Brilliant, careful, Stanford, who had always been the responsible one, now looking genuinely terrified. "What did you build?" "I can't explain. Not fully. You wouldn't believe me anyway. Just please, Stanley, for once in your life, do what I ask without asking questions. Take the journal and hide it." Stan felt a surge of old anger. Even now, even when asking for help, Ford couldn't treat him like an equal, couldn't explain, couldn't trust him with the full truth. "I've driven all night to get here because you sent a desperate postcard, and now you won't even tell me what's going on. It's for your own safety. The less you know, the better. That's what you always said. I'm too dumb to understand, right? I should just do what smart Stanford tells me and not ask questions." The argument escalated. Years of resentment poured out from both brothers. Stan accused Ford of abandoning him, of never forgiving him for the science fair incident, of acting superior. Ford accused Stan of ruining his life, of never taking anything seriously, of being selfish and irresponsible. They were standing near the portal, still inactive, but fully built in the basement. In the heat of the argument, Stan gestured wildly and accidentally pushed Ford. Ford stumbled backward toward the portal. In a panic, he grabbed Stan's jacket to steady himself. Stan, off balance, pushed back reflexively. Ford fell toward the portal, which activated at his proximity to its sensors. The swirling vortex opened behind him. "Stanley!" Ford screamed as the portal's gravitational pull grabbed him. "The other journals! Hide them!" And then he was gone, pulled through into the multiverse, lost somewhere in the infinite dimensions beyond. Stan stood frozen, staring at the portal. His brother had just vanished into a swirling vortex of energy and impossible colors. The portal hummed ominously, still active, still open to somewhere. Stan looked around the basement laboratory. He saw journals, 2 more of them, labeled 2 and 3. He saw complex machinery, far beyond his understanding. He saw his brother's life's work, and his brother was gone. Stan made a decision in that moment that would define the next 30 years of his life. He would fix this. He would learn how this portal worked. He would bring his brother back, even if it took forever. The 30-year wait. Stanley Pines was not a scientist. He'd barely passed high school physics. He knew nothing about dimensional mechanics or quantum engineering, or any of the advanced concepts necessary to operate an interdimensional portal. But Stan was a survivor. He was resourceful, and he was stubborn. Stan faked his own death in a car accident. Easy enough when you had a twin brother whose identity you could assume. He became Stanford Pines, taking over Ford's life. He turned the cabin into a tourist trap called the Mystery Shack, selling fake oddities to tourists to fund his real work in the basement. Every night, after the tourists left, Stan would go down to the basement and study. He taught himself physics from Ford's books. He worked through the journal calculations, trying to understand the portal's operation. He made countless mistakes, causing small explosions and energy surges that he barely survived. During this time, Bill tried to interfere. Without Ford, Bill couldn't simply activate the portal himself. He needed someone with a physical body to complete the activation sequence. He tried to manipulate Stan through dreams, but Stan had a simpler mind than Ford, less sophisticated, but also harder to trick. Stan knew to be suspicious of dream demons. Bill tried possessing others in Gravity Falls, tried getting them to break into the Mystery Shack and activate the portal, but Stan was paranoid and protective. He installed security systems, booby traps, anything to keep people away from the basement. Years passed. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Stan aged, his hair graying, his body wearing down from the stress and the occasional portal-related accident. But he kept working. He became a fixture in Gravity Falls, the owner of the Mystery Shack, a con man and grump. But harmless enough. No one knew about the basement. No one knew about his real work. Stan convinced himself he was doing the right thing, that he could control the portal safely once he understood it. He convinced himself he could bring Ford back without unleashing the chaos Ford had warned about. He was wrong, but his intentions were good. And sometimes, in the vastness of cosmic consequences, good intentions matter almost as much as being right. The portal powers up. After 30 years of work, Stan finally succeeded. He understood the portal's operations. He'd repaired the damage from Ford's half-completed shutdown. He'd solved the equations, calibrated the machinery, and prepared for activation. The portal powered up on a summer day in 2012. The entire Mystery Shack shook with the energy surge. The dimensional barrier thinned. The rift between worlds opened, and Stanford Pines, aged but alive, stepped through from the multiverse. "You!" Ford's first words to Stan were angry. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Stan had expected gratitude. Instead, he got accusation. "I saved you. I spent 30 years of my life bringing you back. The portal is a gateway to the nightmare realm. Activating it created a rift in dimensional space. If that rift is shattered, Bill Cipher and his friends will be able to enter our world." "Who's Bill Cipher?" Ford stared at his brother. 30 years apart, and Stan didn't even know the name of the entity Ford had been running from. "The demon I made a deal with. The one who manipulated me into building this portal. The most dangerous being in any dimension." Stan looked around the basement, at the portal, still humming with energy, at the rift that had formed, a crack in space-time that Ford was frantically working to contain. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know. You never know. You act without thinking, and everyone else has to deal with the consequences." They were fighting again, just like always. The same arguments, the same accusations, just 30 years older. But this time, the consequences of their conflict would affect more than just themselves. This time, Bill Cipher was watching and waiting for his opportunity. The Pines twins arrive. It was summer 2012 when Dipper and Mabel Pines arrived in Gravity Falls to spend the summer with their great-uncle Stan. The 12-year-old twins had been sent by their parents, who thought a summer in a small Oregon town would be a nice break from their suburban California life. Dipper, whose real name was Mason, but no one called him that, was anxious, analytical. He approached the world with careful observation and detailed note-taking. He wanted to be taken seriously, to solve mysteries, to prove he was more than just a kid. Mabel was his opposite in almost every way, enthusiastically optimistic, creative, prone to impulsive decisions and elaborate crafts projects. She saw the world as full of potential friends and adventures. Where Dipper worried, Mabel embraced. They complemented each other perfectly, these twins. They'd been inseparable their entire lives, despite their differences. They were best friends who happened to share the same birthday and nearly identical DNA. They arrived at the Mystery Shack expecting a boring summer. They had no idea they were walking into the epicenter of weirdness, into a cosmic chess game that had been playing out for billions of years. Stan put them to work in the Mystery Shack, having Dipper give tours of fake exhibits while Mabel operated the gift shop. It seemed like typical cheap tourist trap work, boring but harmless. Then Dipper found the journal. The journal. During a trip into the woods, Dipper discovered something extraordinary. A hollow tree with a hidden compartment, and inside, a weathered journal marked with a golden 6-fingered hand and the number 3. The journal's first page contained a warning: trust no one. The rest contained detailed documentation of Gravity Falls' supernatural phenomena. Gnomes, zombies, cursed objects, time travelers, shapeshifters, all documented with scientific precision and hand-drawn illustrations. For Dipper, it was a revelation. The weird things he'd been noticing around Gravity Falls weren't just his imagination. They were real, documented, cataloged. And whoever had written this journal had been trying to understand them. Dipper became obsessed with the journal, using it to investigate the mysteries around him. He didn't know it was written by his great-uncle Ford. He didn't know about the portal in the basement. He didn't know about Bill Cipher. But Bill knew about him. Bill's first approach. Bill had been watching the Mystery Shack since the portal had activated. The rift had been created. The crack in dimensional space that was Bill's potential doorway into the physical world. But it was currently stabilized, contained in a specialized device Ford had built. Bill needed that rift to be shattered, and for that, he needed access to someone close to it, preferably someone naive enough to manipulate. These new kids were perfect, young, curious, with access to the Mystery Shack. One of them even had the journal, Ford's journal, containing so much valuable information. Bill's first direct contact with Dipper came through dreams. Dipper had been struggling with a problem, trying to crack the password to an old laptop he'd found. The laptop belonged to Ford and might contain additional information about Gravity Falls. In Dipper's dream, Bill appeared, not as a threatening demon, but as a helpful, strange entity. Need some help there, Pine Tree? Bill had a habit of giving people nicknames based on their appearance or personality. Who? What are you? Dipper asked in the dream. Name's Bill Cipher. I'm a being of pure energy with no weakness. But don't worry, I'm just here to help. I can show you how to get into that laptop. All you need to do is let me enter your mind for a moment. Enter my mind? Nothing scary. Think of it like letting me borrow your body as a puppet. You'll be conscious, just not in control. 2 seconds, tops, I'll crack that password, and boom, you get your answers. Dipper was curious about the laptop's contents, and Bill seemed weird, but not dangerous. In the logic of dreams, where nothing seems quite as risky as it should, Dipper agreed. The moment Bill took control of Dipper's body, his personality changed. Bill and Dipper's body was manic, destructive, gleefully chaotic. He ran through the mystery shack, causing havoc, nearly destroyed the journal, and threatened Mabel when she tried to stop him. It was only through Mabel's intervention, tackling her possessed brother and demanding he give Dipper back, that the situation was resolved. Bill laughed it off as a misunderstanding and left Dipper's body, but the message was clear. Bill Cipher was not to be trusted. Patterns of manipulation. This encounter established a pattern that would repeat throughout the summer. Bill would approach someone with an offer. The offer would seem beneficial. There would be a catch, but it wouldn't seem that significant. The person would agree. And then everything would go horribly wrong. Bill possessed Blendin Blandin, a time traveler, and used him to manipulate time in Gravity Falls. He entered the mind of Gideon Gleeful, a child psychic with dreams of power, and encouraged his worst impulses. He made deals with various residents of Gravity Falls, each time sowing chaos and moving his pieces closer to his ultimate goal. But Bill was patient. He didn't need to rush. The rift existed, stabilized, but fragile. All Bill needed was the right opportunity, the right vulnerable person, the right moment of crisis. He found it in Mabel. Understanding Mabel's vulnerability. Mabel Pines was optimistic, creative, and deeply afraid of change. Beneath her cheerful exterior was anxiety about the future. She and Dipper were about to turn 13. After the summer, they'd be teenagers. High school was approaching. The comfortable, creative childhood she loved was ending. More immediately, Dipper had been offered an apprenticeship with Ford, who had emerged from the portal and was now living in the Mystery Shack's basement, working to keep the rift stable. The apprenticeship would mean Dipper staying in Gravity Falls when summer ended. Mabel would return to California alone. For 12 years, Mabel and Dipper had been inseparable. They'd shared a room, shared friends, shared everything. The idea of being apart was terrifying to Mabel. It felt like losing her best friend, her twin, half of herself. Bill recognized this fear, and he knew exactly how to use it. Mabel and Bill didn't approach Mabel directly. That would raise suspicion. Instead, he worked through an intermediary, Blendin Blandin, whom Bill had encountered before and knew was vulnerable to manipulation. Bill possessed Blendin and offered Mabel a deal. Time manipulation abilities to try to delay the end of summer. Mabel, desperate to keep things from changing, accepted the deal. But Bill had a different plan. He trapped Mabel in a prison of her own design, a bubble of frozen time that appeared to be paradise. Inside the bubble, it was a perfect, eternal summer. Mabel had friends, fun, no responsibilities, no difficult choices. Everything stayed exactly the way she wanted forever. Bill called it Mabeland, Mabel's land, a paradise created from her own dreams and desires. And in exchange for this paradise, Mabel had unknowingly given Bill the one thing he needed, the rift. Mabel hadn't understood what the rift was. Ford had kept it in his laboratory, stabilized but hidden, not explaining its significance to the kids, for fear of putting them in danger. When Blendin, really Bill in Blendin's body, asked for the rift as payment for the time manipulation deal, Mabel thought it was just some weird scientific device. She handed it over. The rift shattered, and reality broke. Guilt and responsibility. Later, when Mabel was freed from her bubble prison and learned what her deal had caused, the guilt was crushing. She had ended the world. She had given Bill his doorway. Everything that followed, all the chaos, all the destruction, all the suffering was her fault. Dipper tried to reassure her. Bill tricked you. He's a master manipulator. It's not your fault. But Mabel knew the truth was more complicated. Yes, Bill had tricked her, but she'd also made the deal because she was afraid, because she wanted to avoid facing difficult realities. She'd chosen comfort over courage. This was Bill's particular cruelty. He didn't just destroy things. He made people destroy things themselves. He made them complicit in their own downfall. He gave them exactly what they claimed they wanted, and then showed them why they shouldn't have wanted it. Mabel's guilt was part of Bill's victory. Even if they somehow stopped him, she would carry this forever. The rift shatters. When the rift shattered, reality didn't break all at once. It started small. The sky flickered. Colors that shouldn't exist bled through the normal blue. Gravity hesitated, objects floating for a moment, before remembering they were supposed to fall. The air tasted of copper and ozone, and something else, something that had no name in human language. Then the tear widened. Through the crack in space-time, the nightmare realm began to pour through, not slowly, not cautiously, but in a flood of impossible chaos. Bill Cipher emerged first, finally physical in a way he'd never been before. His form solidified, no longer just a dream entity, but a being of matter and energy both. He was still triangular, still yellow with a single eye, but now he was real, tangible, powerful. Well. Bill's voice echoed across Gravity Falls, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Took you long enough, Sixer. I've been waiting an eternity for this. Behind Bill came his friends, the hench maniacs, pouring through the rift in a parade of impossibilities. 8-Ball, Teeth, Cryptos, Pyronica, and dozens of others. Beings of chaos and madness, finally free from their dimensional prison, finally unleashed upon physical reality. Bill hovered above Gravity Falls, his single eye surveying the town below. All right, listen up. People and various other organisms. This town has a new sheriff, and his name is Bill. And then he began to reshape reality. The first hours, the transformation of Gravity Falls happened quickly. Bill's power, unlimited in the mindscape, and now manifest in the physical world, warped the town according to his whim. Physics became optional. Gravity pointed in random directions, sideways, up in spirals. Time flowed backward in some areas, forward in others, stood completely still in others. Causality suggested things, rather than demanding them. The landscape twisted. Mountains moved. Buildings merged with trees. The forest began walking on its own roots. The ground was sometimes solid, sometimes liquid, sometimes not there at all. But worse than the physical changes was what Bill did to the people. Bill's friends needed entertainment, and Bill was a gracious host. He transformed humans into decorations, into furniture, into living statues, frozen in expressions of terror. He turned some into banners celebrating his conquest. He rearranged others into grotesque monuments to chaos. Some people he simply warped, stretching their limbs, rearranging their features, turning them inside out without killing them. They remained conscious, aware, trapped in bodies that had become prisons. This wasn't murder. Murder would have been merciful. This was art from Bill's perspective. Creative expression using the medium of reality itself. The screams were music. The terror was appreciation. Bill wasn't cruel in the conventional sense. He didn't hate these people. He simply didn't care about their suffering any more than an artist cares about the feelings of paint. They were raw materials for his masterpiece, a world remade in chaos. The pyramid. At the center of Gravity Falls, Bill constructed his throne, a massive pyramid that rose from the earth, defying gravity and geometry. Both. It was his castle, his stronghold, his monument to victory. The pyramid's interior was a maze of impossible rooms, staircases that led nowhere, doors that opened to different dimensions, halls that extended infinitely despite the pyramid's finite size. It was a physical manifestation of the nightmare realm, Bill's home dimension made real. From the pyramid's apex, Bill could see all of Gravity Falls. His weird Mageddon, his reign of chaos, was in full effect. Reality had been his playground for billions of years in the mindscape. Now, it was his playground in the physical world, too. He threw a party, a massive celebration with his hench-maniacs, full of chaos and destruction, and games played with the altered residents of Gravity Falls. Music that hurt to hear, played from sources that didn't exist. Lights in colors with no names blazed from the pyramid. Bill was finally, truly, completely happy. For a few hours, the barrier. Problem. Bill's celebration was interrupted by a discovery. His power, infinite as it seemed, stopped at Gravity Falls' town borders. The same natural weirdness that had made Gravity Falls vulnerable to Bill's invasion. The crystallized anomaly energy, the thin dimensional barrier, also created a shell around the town. Bill's chaos couldn't spread beyond it. The rest of the world remained normal, unaffected. Bill tried to break through. He threw energy at the barrier, bent space around it, attempted to simply brute force his way past it. Nothing worked. The barrier held. Okay, Bill muttered to himself, floating back to his pyramid. Not a problem. Just need to think this through. Can't let the hench-maniacs know I hit a snag. Bad for morale. Bill understood dimensional mechanics better than almost anyone. He knew there had to be a way past the barrier. And after analyzing its structure, studying the weirdness that formed it, he found the answer. There was an equation, a specific mathematical formula that would unlock the barrier, allowing Bill's chaos to spread globally. The equation was incredibly complex, requiring knowledge of dimensional physics that few beings possessed. But Bill knew someone who had that knowledge, someone who had traveled across dimensions for 30 years, who had studied reality's fundamental structures, who had learned secrets most beings couldn't comprehend. Stanford Pines had the equation in his mind, protected by decades of paranoia and mental defenses. Bill needed to get into Ford's head, and Ford, knowing this, had been very careful not to let that happen. The hunt for Ford had been preparing for Bill's arrival since the moment he'd returned through the portal. He'd built weapons, created defenses, developed mental protection techniques. He'd warned Dipper and tried to warn Mabel, though she hadn't understood the warning before making her deal. When Weird Mageddon began, Ford activated his plan. He rescued as many survivors as he could, brought them to the Mystery Shack, and activated a unicorn hair-based shield that protected the building from Bill's power. Inside the shield, reality remained normal. Outside, chaos reigned. Bill, naturally, wanted Ford, not just for the equation, but for revenge. Ford had defied him, had shut down the portal, had tried to prevent this moment. Ford needed to be made an example of. Bill sent his hench-maniacs to hunt for Ford. They scoured Gravity Falls, tearing apart buildings, interrogating transformed citizens, searching everywhere. But Ford was careful. He'd learned paranoia from his years in the multiverse. He'd learned to hide, to move carefully, to never be where his enemies expected. The hunt became a game. Bill enjoyed games. He made it a challenge to his friends. Whoever found Ford would get a special reward. The henchmaniacs swept through Gravity Falls like a violent storm, destroying more of the town in their search. Dipper's resistance. While Bill hunted Ford, Dipper organized a resistance. He was 12 years old, armed with a journal and determination, leading a group of survivors against an interdimensional demon. It was absurd. It was hopeless. It was incredibly brave. Dipper had learned from the journal, from his summer of adventures, from Ford's teachings. He knew Gravity Falls mysteries. He knew where to hide, how to fight weird creatures, which artifacts might be useful against Bill's forces. The resistance accomplished small victories. They freed some prisoners. They disrupted Bill's henchmaniacs. They saved people who would have been transformed. Each victory was tiny compared to the scale of the disaster, but they mattered. Dipper kept hoping for a solution, a weakness, some way to undo Weird Mageddon. He refused to give up even when it seemed hopeless, because that's what heroes do. And Dipper, despite being 12, despite being terrified, despite knowing he was outmatched, chose to be a hero. Mabel's prison. While chaos reigned outside, Mabel remained trapped in her bubble prison. Mabeland, the paradise Bill had created for her. Inside, everything was perfect. Eternal summer, infinite fun, no responsibilities, no difficult choices. Mabel had everything she thought she wanted, but it was empty. It was fake. Mabel knew, on some level, that this wasn't real. The friends she made were fantasies. The fun was hollow. The perfection was a prison. Dipper, Wendy, and Seuss eventually broke into the bubble to rescue her. They found Mabel enjoying herself, but also aware that something was wrong. When confronted with the choice, stay in the fake paradise or return to reality with all its complications, Mabel chose reality. I'd rather be in a complicated world with you than a perfect world without you, she told Dipper. It was growth. It was courage. It was accepting that change happens and fighting through it rather than hiding from it. Mabel escaped her bubble, returned to Gravity Falls, saw the destruction her deal had caused, and she chose to fight Bill, to fix what she'd broken, to take responsibility. The capture. Despite everyone's efforts, Bill eventually captured Ford. The henchmaniacs cornered him, overwhelmed his defenses, and brought him to the pyramid in chains. Bill was ecstatic. "Sixer, my old pal. Been a while, hasn't it? How many years for you? 30? 40? Time gets weird in the multiverse." Ford glared at his captor. "I'll never tell you the equation, Bill." "Oh, I think you will. See, I've got leverage now." Bill gestured to the transformed citizens of Gravity Falls, to the chaos, to the suffering. "All of this ends when you give me what I want. You give me the equation, I let everyone go, and we all live happily ever after. Well, I do, anyway. You're lying. You'll spread your chaos across the world regardless. Maybe, but if you don't tell me, I'll make everyone here suffer forever. And it'll be your fault, Fortsy. Your selfishness, your pride. All these people, tormented for eternity. Because you wouldn't share one little equation." Ford had prepared for this. He'd strengthened his mind, built mental walls, created defenses that would keep Bill out, even under torture. But Bill didn't just have Ford. Bill had captured Stan, Dipper, Mabel, the whole family. And Bill was creative with his threats. Torture and defiance. Bill didn't just threaten the Pines' family, he hurt them. Systematically, creatively, specifically designed to break Ford's will. He encased Stan in stone, conscious but unable to move. He suspended Dipper and Mabel in cages that slowly filled with nightmares, made physical. He showed Ford visions of what would happen to them if Ford continued to resist. Just tell me the equation, Fordsey. Is it really worth it? Watching your family suffer for some mathematical formula? Ford wavered, not because of his own pain. He could endure that. But watching his brother, his grandniece and nephew, suffering because of him, that was harder. Bill saw the hesitation. He pressed harder, more pain, more creative torments, more psychological pressure. You know what's funny, Bill said, his eye gleaming. You built that portal thinking you were doing something great. You trusted me. And even after you figured out I was tricking you, even after all this time, you're still helping me. Because your family is here, because you called Stan. That day, Mabel made that deal because she was hurt by Dipper's apprenticeship with you. Everything that's happened is because of choices you made. It was cruel, but not entirely untrue. Ford's actions, however well-intentioned, had set events in motion. His brilliance, his ambition, his isolation, all had played into Bill's hands. But Ford had learned from his mistakes. He'd learned that he didn't have to face everything alone. He'd learned to trust others, particularly his brother. And that gave him an idea. A terrible idea. A desperate idea that might work. The desperate plan. Ford looked at his brother, encased in stone, and saw not the screw-up he'd blamed for so many things, but the person who had spent 30 years trying to save him. The person who had never given up, even when it seemed hopeless. Stan, Ford said quietly, I have an idea, but you're going to hate it. Through the stone, Stan managed a muffled response. Bill, confident in his impending victory, allowed it. What? Stan asked. We switch clothes. You pretend to be me. Bill thinks you're me, enters your mind instead of mine. And then, Stan understood immediately. The memory gun. The memory gun was a device that existed in Gravity Falls, created by the Society of the Blind Eye to erase memories. Ford had studied it, understood its mechanisms. It could erase a mind completely if overused. If Bill entered Stan's mind and they used the memory gun on Stan, it would erase Stan's consciousness, and Bill, being inside that mind at the moment of erasure, would be erased too. You'd lose everything, Ford said. Every memory, every experience, everything that makes you, you. Stan laughed, a bitter sound. Yeah, I figured. That's why I'm gonna hate it. We don't have to do this. We can find another way. Ford, shut up. You spent 40 years trying to fix your mistakes. I spent 30 years trying to fix mine. Maybe this is how we both make things right. Stanley. Besides, Stan said, managing something like a smile even trapped in stone. If I don't remember being your brother, I won't remember all the times you were a jerk to me. Might be an improvement. It was the most heroic thing Stan had ever said, disguised as a joke. Because that's who Stan was. Someone who faced terrible things with humor, who made sacrifices seem casual, who loved his family, even when they didn't appreciate it. Ford felt tears in his eyes. When this is over, we'll help you remember. I promise. Yeah. Now shut up and switch clothes before Triangle Face realizes we're planning something. The switching places required careful coordination. Ford and Stan were twins, but they'd aged differently. Ford in the multiverse, Stan in Gravity Falls. They had different scars, different postures, different mannerisms, but they'd been practicing being each other their whole lives. Every time Stan had pretended to be Ford over the past 30 years. Every childhood prank where they'd confused people. They knew each other's patterns, movements, speech. With the kids' help, creating a distraction, Ford and Stan managed the switch. Stan put on Ford's coat. Ford put on Stan's suit. They adjusted their postures, their expressions. To an outside observer, the difference would be obvious. But to Bill, who'd mostly known Ford from dreams and hadn't seen him in person for decades, who was arrogant and certain of his victory, Bill bought it. Inside, the mind. When Bill entered, who he thought was Ford's mind, he expected resistance. Mental barriers, traps, defenses built up over 40 years of paranoia. Instead, he found a strange landscape, memories that didn't quite fit, a mind organized differently than he remembered Ford's being. "Huh," Bill said, floating through the mindscape. "Ford, buddy, did your brain get scrambled during those years in the multiverse? This place is a mess." He wandered through memories of carnival barking, of failed business ventures, of life on the road, memories that seemed wrong for the genius scientist Bill remembered. "Where's that equation, Fordsy? I know it's in here somewhere." Then Bill found a memory that made him pause. A memory of two children on a beach making a promise. A memory of brotherhood, of loyalty, of sacrifice. "Wait a minute." Bill turned and saw Stan's consciousness grinning at him. "Hey, Cipher, guess what? You just made your last deal." No, this is a trick. You can't." Outside the mindscape, Dipper and Mabel aimed the memory gun at Stan's head. Ford stood beside Stan, holding his brother's hand. "I know this is the end," Ford said quietly. "I just want you to know I'm sorry for everything. You're a better person than I ever gave you credit for." Stan smiled. "Hup, tell me that after, if I remember who you are." And they fired the gun. Erasure. The memory gun worked in stages. First, it erased recent memories, then older ones, then fundamental things, language, identity, basic concepts. Inside the mindscape, Bill felt it happening. He tried to escape, tried to jump to another mind, tried to teleport back to the nightmare realm, but he was trapped, bound by the rules of the deal he'd made, locked inside a mind that was actively erasing itself. "No, I can still fix this. I can..." Bill's form began to flicker, to fade. "Wait, I have a better deal. I can give you anything. Infinite power, wealth. I can bring back anyone you've lost. I can..." And the memories continued erasing. Stan's identity dissolved. His understanding of language faded. Bill's consciousness, intertwined with Stan's, faded with it. Bill's last words were a desperate invocation. AXOLOTL. My time has come to burn. I invoke the ancient power that I may return. It was a plea to something, some entity or force that existed beyond even Bill's comprehension. The axolotl, a cosmic being of regeneration and second chances. Whether the plea was heard, whether it would be answered, no one knew. Bill Cipher's form flickered one last time. His eye, that single yellow eye that had watched the birth and death of dimensions, that had seen the destruction of his home reality, that had masterminded the chaos of Weirdmageddon, dimmed, and then he was gone. The aftermath. With Bill's erasure, Weirdmageddon ended. The connection to the nightmare realm severed. The pyramid crumbled. The henchmaniacs were pulled back through the closing dimensional gateway, screaming and raging, torn from physical reality, and hurled back into the chaos they came from. Physics reasserted itself. Gravity pointed down. Again, time flowed forward consistently. The sky returned to normal blue. The transformed citizens of Gravity Falls began to revert. Slowly, painfully, their bodies and minds returned to normal. Not everyone survived the transformation back. Some were too damaged, too changed, but most lived. The town was in ruins. Buildings were destroyed. The landscape was scarred. The psychological trauma would last for years, but they had survived. Reality had survived. And Stan stood there, looking at his hands like he'd never seen them before, with no idea who he was, or where he was, or why people were crying and thanking him. "Do I know you folks?" Stan asked the family gathered around him. Ford stepped forward, trying not to cry. Yes, you do. You're Stanley Pines, and you just saved the world." "Huh, that's so?" Stan looked confused, but not upset. "Sounds like something I'd do. I'm guessing there's a good story behind all this?" "The best story," Mabel said through tears, "and we're going to help you remember every bit of it. Restoration. The final days of summer were spent helping Stan remember. It was slow, painful work. Memory doesn't return all at once, especially when it's been forcibly erased. They showed Stan photos, told him stories, brought him to places that might trigger recollection. Mabel made a scrapbook of the summer's adventures. Dipper read to him from the journals. Ford talked about their childhood, about their years apart, about everything Stan had done to bring him home. Slowly, pieces came back. Not all at once, not in order, but gradually, Stan began to remember. He remembered his brother. He remembered the mystery shack. He remembered Dipper and Mabel. He remembered his life, the failures and successes, the regrets and the triumphs. The person who emerged wasn't exactly the same Stan who had sacrificed himself. Memory reconstruction isn't perfect. Some things were lost forever. Some things came back different than they'd been. But the core of who Stan was, the loyalty, the humor, the stubborn determination, that remained. That was too fundamental to erase, too essential to the structure of his being. By summer's end, Stan was mostly himself again. Different, maybe. Changed by the experience. But himself. The cleanup, Gravity Falls, had to deal with the aftermath of Weirdmageddon. The government got involved, inevitable when an entire town experiences an interdimensional invasion. There were investigations, cover-ups, attempts to rationalize what had happened. The Society of the Blind Eye reformed, not to erase memories, but to help people process trauma. Counseling groups formed, support networks emerged. The town came together in ways it never had before, unified by shared experience. Some residents left, unable to deal with what had happened. Others stayed, committed to rebuilding. The town would never be exactly the same. How could it be? But it would recover, adapt, continue. The Mystery Shack became more than a tourist trap. It became a memorial to what had happened, a reminder of the summer when reality broke and a family saved it. Ford and Stan's decision. With the town recovering, Ford and Stan faced their own choice. What now? Ford had been offered positions at prestigious universities. After his return and the revelation of his research, carefully edited to remove the most dangerous information, he was recognized as a brilliant scientist. He could have any job he wanted, but Ford looked at his brother and remembered what they'd talked about as kids, a boat, an adventure. Seeing the world together, just the two of them. "Stan," Ford said, "do you remember our childhood dream?" Stan grinned. The Stan-O War, too. Of course I remember. I've been thinking about it. What if we actually did it? Took the boat, sailed around the world, had the adventures we always planned? You'd give up your career for that? Stan, I've spent 40 years prioritizing career over family. I think it's time I got my priorities straight. Besides, Ford smiled, the world's a pretty interesting place. Lots of anomalies to study. And I'd have a research partner I can actually trust. Stan laughed. A research partner who barely passed high school science. You've rebuilt an interdimensional portal through self-taught physics. I think you're selling yourself short. So they decided they would spend the year making repairs to the town, helping it recover. Then they would leave together, two old men on a boat, having the adventure they should have had 50 years ago. Better late than never. The twins go home. Dipper and Mabel had to return to California. School was starting. Their parents were expecting them. The goodbye was bittersweet. They'd grown so much over the summer. They'd faced impossible things, made difficult choices, learned what they were capable of. Do you think we'll ever have another summer like this? Mabel asked. I hope not, Dipper said. In the sense that I hope we never have to fight an interdimensional demon again. But I hope we have more adventures. Together. Together, Mabel agreed. They'd learned that change was inevitable, but that didn't mean relationships had to end. They could grow up and grow apart in some ways while staying close in others. They could face the future without losing each other. The bus arrived to take them home. They hugged their grunkles, promised to visit, said tearful goodbyes to the friends they'd made. As they pulled away from Gravity Falls, Dipper looked back at the town, at the forest, at the strange little place that had changed their lives. We'll be back, he said. And they would be. Different, older, changed by time and experience. But they'd be back, because Gravity Falls, with all its weirdness and danger and wonder, was part of them now. And some places, once they get into your heart, never really leave. The journals, Fate Ford considered what to do with the journals. They contained dangerous information, details about the portal, about Bill, about anomalies that could be weaponized or misused. He could destroy them. It would be the safe choice, the responsible choice. But the journals also contained valuable knowledge, understanding of phenomena that science couldn't explain, documentation of things that existed on the edges of reality, information that could help people understand and protect themselves from the weird. In the end, Ford made copies, carefully edited versions with the most dangerous information removed. Those copies he donated to research institutions, to libraries, to places where they might help people. The originals, complete and unedited, he kept, not hidden, but protected, available to those who needed them, but guarded against those who would misuse them. Knowledge itself wasn't dangerous. It was what people did with knowledge that mattered. And Ford had learned that lesson the hard way. The nature of Bill Cipher. Now, as we reach the end of our journey through Bill Cipher's story, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned, to think about who Bill really was, beneath the chaos and the cruelty and the cosmic horror. Bill Cipher was many things: a demon, a trickster, a manipulator, a being of near infinite power who had existed for billions of years. But perhaps most fundamentally, Bill was a tragedy. Think about his origins. A being born in a dimension that couldn't comprehend him, gifted with sight that isolated him from everyone he knew. He could see truths others couldn't perceive, and that gift destroyed his connection to his own society. Was Bill responsible for the destruction of his dimension? The answer isn't simple. He may have caused it directly, or it may have been an unintended consequence of trying to help his people see what he saw. We'll never know for certain. But what we do know is that Bill carried that destruction with him for billions of years. Every action he took afterward was shaped by it. The loss of everyone and everything he'd known didn't make Bill compassionate. It made him nihilistic. If his entire dimension could be destroyed, if everyone he'd ever known could be gone in an instant, then what did anything matter? Might as well reshape reality into something interesting. Might as well play games with the universe, because the universe had already shown him it was fundamentally random and cruel. The psychology of manipulation. Bill's manipulation techniques reveal a lot about his understanding of minds and motivations. He was brilliant at reading people, at finding their vulnerabilities, at offering them exactly what they thought they wanted. With Ford, Bill offered validation and collaboration. Ford wanted to be recognized as brilliant, wanted to achieve something meaningful, wanted a partner who understood him. Bill provided all of that while secretly using Ford to build the portal. With Mabel, Bill offered eternal summer and escape from change. Mabel wanted time to stop, wanted things to stay comfortable and familiar. Bill gave her that, while taking the rift in exchange. Bill understood that people don't usually make bad decisions because they're stupid or evil. They make bad decisions because they're afraid, or lonely, or desperate. They want shortcuts to difficult goals. They want easy answers to complex questions. Bill provided those shortcuts and easy answers, and the price was always higher than advertised. What makes this particularly tragic is that Bill's victims weren't weak or foolish. Ford was brilliant. Mabel was kind. Both made deals with Bill because they were human, subject to fear and desire like everyone else. This is why Bill was so dangerous. Not because he had ultimate power, he didn't. His power was limited in specific ways. But because he understood the human heart, understood its weaknesses and desires, and knew exactly how to exploit them. The meaning of Weirdmageddon. Weirdmageddon wasn't just chaos for chaos's sake. It was Bill's vision made real. After billions of years in the nightmare realm, existing only in minds and dreams, Bill finally had the chance to reshape physical reality according to his desires. And what did he create? A world without rules, without limitations, without the boring consistency of physics and causality. A world where anything could happen, where reality was negotiable, where the only law was Bill's whim. To Bill, this was paradise. This was liberation from the constraints that had destroyed his home dimension. In a world without fixed rules, no one could be hurt by trying to break those rules. But to everyone else, it was hell, because most beings need consistency. They need to know that gravity will pull them down, that time will flow forward, that their bodies will remain their own. Uncertainty is fine in small doses, but constant chaos is torture. Bill couldn't understand this. Or perhaps he could understand it intellectually, but didn't care. His empathy, if he'd ever had it, had been burned away, along with his home dimension. The question of redemption. Could Bill have been redeemed? Was there ever a chance for him to change, to become something other than what he was? It's a difficult question. Bill had existed for billions of years, had caused unimaginable suffering, had destroyed countless lives across multiple dimensions. The weight of his actions was enormous, but beneath the monster was a being who had once been different, who had tried to help his people see what he saw, who had experienced loss and trauma on a scale few beings could comprehend. In his final moments, Bill didn't go quietly into oblivion. He pleaded. He tried to make one more deal. He invoked the axolotl, begging for another chance. That desperation, that unwillingness to simply end, suggests that some part of Bill still wanted to exist, still wanted to matter, still perhaps wanted to be understood. But redemption requires more than just wanting another chance. It requires acknowledging harm done, making amends, choosing to change. Bill never did any of those things. He never admitted his mistakes, never showed remorse, never tried to fix the damage he caused. So the answer is, maybe Bill could have been redeemed, but he chose not to be. He chose chaos over order, manipulation over honesty, power over connection. And in the end, that choice destroyed him. The legacy Bill. Cipher's legacy is complicated. He was defeated, erased from existence. But the impact he had on reality remains. Gravity Falls will never forget Weird Mageddon. The town carries scars, physical and psychological, from Bill's reign. The people who survived will tell stories about it for the rest of their lives. Children will grow up hearing about the summer reality broke. Ford will carry guilt about his role in Bill's plan. Stan will always have gaps in his memory from his erasure. Dipper and Mabel will be shaped by the experiences they had, the choices they made, the things they learned. But Bill's legacy isn't entirely negative. The fight against him brought people together. It showed what humans are capable of when facing impossible odds. It proved that even the most powerful demon can be defeated if people work together and make sacrifices. The Pines family, broken and scattered before, became whole through their battle with Bill. Ford and Stan reconciled. Dipper and Mabel learned to face change together. The family bonds, tested to their limits, held. In a strange way, Bill's threat created the circumstances for healing and growth. Not because Bill wanted that. He didn't care about human growth, but because humans, when faced with destruction, often find ways to become better than they were. The unanswered questions. Bill's story ends with mysteries. What was the axolotl he called out to in his final moment? Is Bill truly gone, or could he somehow return? What happened to the nightmare realm after Bill's defeat? These questions may never have answers, and perhaps that's appropriate. Bill was, fundamentally, a being of mystery. He appeared in dreams, spoke in riddles, hid his true nature behind jokes and chaos. Some things are meant to remain unknown. Some mysteries don't need solutions. Sometimes the uncertainty itself is the point. What matters isn't whether Bill could return, but what people would do if he did. The lessons learned from Weird Mageddon, the strength gained from surviving it, the connections formed through facing it together. Those things remain regardless of Bill's ultimate fate. What Bill teaches us. So, what can we learn from the story of Bill Cipher? What lessons does this Dream Demons Rise and Fall offer? First, be careful who you trust, especially when they offer you exactly what you want. The best manipulators don't force you into bad decisions. They make bad decisions seem like good ideas. Second, knowledge and power without wisdom is dangerous. Ford was brilliant, but his brilliance wasn't enough. He needed to learn to trust others, to ask for help, to admit when he was wrong. Third, running from problems, hiding from change, doesn't make them go away. Mabel learned this the hard way. Her attempt to escape the future by accepting Bill's deal only made things worse. Fourth, family matters. Relationships matter. Stan spent 30 years fixing a portal to save his brother. Ford learned to value his brother more than his pride. Dipper and Mabel chose each other over their fears. These connections saved the world. Fifth, sometimes the only way to defeat a monster is through sacrifice. Stan gave up his identity to erase Bill. It was a terrible price, but it was necessary. Heroes make hard choices. Sixth, the universe is stranger and more complex than we usually acknowledge. Bill existed on the edges of reality, in the spaces between dimensions. His existence proved that there's more to the world than what we can easily perceive or understand. Finally, empathy matters. Bill's greatest weakness was his inability to understand or care about others' suffering. His lack of empathy made him powerful, but also isolated. In the end, it was empathy, the Pines family's love for each other, that defeated him. The quiet after the chaos. Let's take a moment here, in the stillness, to imagine gravity falls after Weirdmageddon, the town slowly healing, people rebuilding their homes, their lives, their sense of normalcy. The forest grows back where it was scorched, buildings rise where they fell, the scars fade, though they never entirely disappear. Life continues. Tourists return to the Mystery Shack. Children play in the streets. The weird things that always existed in Gravity Falls, the gnomes and grimloblins and impossible creatures, continue existing because they were there long before Bill and will be there long after. The sun rises and sets. Seasons change. Time flows forward, consistent and reliable, the way it's supposed to. In this quiet reconstruction, there's hope. The world didn't end. Reality held. People survived. And now they rebuild, stronger and wiser than before. This is what Bill couldn't destroy. The fundamental resilience of beings who care about each other, who work together, who choose to keep going even after terrible things happen. A dream. Demon's dream. I wonder sometimes what Bill dreamed about. Dream demons can presumably dream, though what such dreams might contain is hard to imagine. Did Bill dream of his home dimension, intact and whole? Did he see his people before he showed them the third dimension, before everything burned? Did he dream of other lives he might have lived, other choices he might have made? A path where he used his gift to help rather than harm, where he found connection rather than isolation? Or did Bill dream of chaos and power, of realities bent to his will, of infinite dimensions reshaped according to his vision? Did he dream the same dreams, awake and asleep, desire and nightmare, indistinguishable? We'll never know. Bill is gone, erased from existence. His dreams ended with his consciousness. Whatever he hoped for, feared, desired, all of it ended in Stanley Pines' fading mind. But the question remains, what does a demon dream of? What does a being of pure chaos desire when desire itself becomes chaotic? Perhaps Bill dreamed of being understood, of finding someone who could see what he saw without being destroyed by it, of sharing his vision with someone who could appreciate it. If so, he never found it. And that, perhaps, is the saddest part of his story. The watchers at the edge. Even now, even with Bill gone, there are watchers at the edge of reality. Other beings, other entities, observing our dimension from outside. The nightmare realm still exists, still touches our world at thin points. Bill wasn't the only dream demon. He was just the most ambitious, the most dangerous, the one who came closest to succeeding. Others remain, lurking in the spaces between waking and sleeping, whispering in nightmares, making small deals with desperate dreamers. They learn from Bill's failure. They're more careful now, more patient, but they're also constrained by the same limitations Bill faced. The barrier between mindscape and physical reality holds. The rules that govern dimensional boundaries remain in place. Gravity Falls is watched over now. Ford and Stan may have sailed away on their boat, but they left protections behind. Dipper and Mabel know what to watch for. The town itself is more aware, more cautious, more prepared. Bill was the first great test. He won't be the last. But each test survived makes the world stronger, wiser, more resilient. The eternal question. As we near the end of our journey through Bill's story, one question remains. Is Bill truly gone? The honest answer is, probably, but not certainly. Bill was erased from Stanley's mind. His connection to physical reality was severed. The nightmare realm entities were expelled. Weird Mageddon ended. But Bill was billions of years old. He had existed across multiple dimensions, had survived the destruction of his own reality. He understood the multiverse in ways few beings could match. His final words, that invocation of the axolotl, suggest he had a backup plan. Some cosmic entity, he believed, might save him, might give him another chance. Whether that entity exists, whether it heard Bill's plea, whether it has the power or desire to help, these questions have no clear answers. What we can say is this: if Bill does return, it won't be the same Bill who was erased. Death, even temporary death, changes beings. Erasure and reconstruction would fundamentally alter any consciousness that went through it, and the world Bill would return to is different than the one he left, more prepared, more aware, less vulnerable to his manipulation. So maybe Bill is gone forever, or maybe he's out there somewhere, in some form, planning his return. Either way, the world keeps turning, people keep living, reality holds, and that, ultimately, is what matters. The gift of stories. Why do we tell stories about beings like Bill Cipher, about demons and monsters and things that lurk at the edges of reality? Perhaps because these stories help us process fears we can't otherwise articulate. The fear of being manipulated, of trusting the wrong person, of our own desires leading us astray. The fear that reality isn't as stable as it seems, that chaos lurks just beneath the surface. But these stories also give us hope. They show us that monsters can be defeated, that families can overcome their differences, that sacrifice matters, that even in the face of impossible odds, humans can find the strength to keep going. Bill Cipher's story is ultimately a story about the dangers of isolation and the power of connection. Bill, isolated and alone for billions of years, became a monster. The Pines family, connected despite their conflicts, became heroes. The lesson is clear. We need each other, not just for survival, though that too, but for meaning, for purpose, for understanding who we are and who we can become. Bill couldn't understand this, and that's why he lost. Good night, Bill Cipher. As we close this long journey through Bill's existence, let's take a moment to say goodbye to him, not with anger or fear, but with understanding. Bill was a monster, yes. He caused terrible suffering. He deserves no sympathy for his actions. But he was also a being who was born different, who destroyed his own home trying to help, who spent billions of years alone in the spaces between dimensions. He was a tragedy before he became a threat. In another universe, with different choices, Bill might have been a hero, someone who used his ability to see beyond dimensions, to help others, to bridge realities, to expand understanding. But that's not the universe we got. We got the Bill who manipulated, who destroyed, who saw other beings as toys rather than people. So we say goodbye to that Bill, the one who haunted dreams, who broke reality, who almost won. He's gone now, erased, ended, and the world is better for it. Good night, Bill Cipher. May your dreams, wherever you are, be less chaotic than the realities you tried to create. Final thoughts. We've spent hours now exploring every aspect of Bill Cipher's existence, from his flat beginnings to his chaotic end, from the nightmare realm to weird Mageddon, from manipulation to erasure. We've examined his methods, his motivations, his victories and defeats. We've looked at the people he affected, the world he tried to reshape, the legacy he left behind. The complete story of Bill Cipher is a story of ambition and isolation, of power and its consequences, of the fine line between helping and harming. It's a story about a triangle with one eye who wanted to remake the universe in his own chaotic image. It's a story about the people who stopped him, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they chose each other over their own fears and desires. It's a story that ended with erasure, but echoes in memory. And now, as we reach the true end of our journey, as your eyes grow heavy and sleep approaches, remember this: the universe is strange. Reality is weirder than we usually acknowledge. Monsters might exist in the spaces between dimensions, but so do heroes, so does family, so does love and sacrifice, and the stubborn human refusal to give up even when all seems lost. Bill Cipher may be gone, but the lessons from his story remain. Trust carefully. Question those who offer easy answers. Treasure your connections. Face change with courage. Sacrifice when necessary. Never give up. These are the truths that defeated a demon billions of years old. These are the weapons that saved reality itself. And if you ever find yourself in a dream and you see a yellow triangle with one eye offering you a deal, run, wake up, remember Bill's story, and choose reality in all its complexity and difficulty over the promises of a dream demon. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the complete story of Bill Cipher. From a flat dimension long ago to his final moments in Stanley Pines' fading mind, we've covered every angle of this triangle's tale. May your dreams be peaceful. May your reality remain stable. May you never need to make a deal with a being from beyond dimensions. Sweet dreams, traveler, and remember, trust no one, but love everyone. That's how we defeat the demons, both real and metaphorical. Good night.